Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. This is your extra show for the week. My name is Cammy Bell. I am your host, as always, and it is a pleasure to be talking to you as Rangers head towards Hampden in what could be hopefully one of the last few games that we play as part of our league fixtures. And joining me to discuss all things Rangers, looking forward to this weekend's game and just the general goings on in and around the club is my very good friend Simon Halloran. Simon, thank you so much for joining me on this week's Extra.
Pleasure as ever, Cammy. Good to be here. Looking forward to discussing the Gers for the next half hour or so.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that as well. And the good news, I think, more than anything else, Simon, right now is apparently the crane has gone.
Yes, crane's off the park. Looks as if works. I mean, there's seats already getting back in as well, and it's actually starting to take shape. It looks pretty good. I know they talked about the 28th against Hibs, but you never know. We could be back in earlier for the Dundee game. So yeah, it's looking pretty good.
Yeah, Rangers sending out a little bit of a kind of teaser with the announcement of our next League Cup game against Dundee in a venue yet to be decided. I mean, it's just this roller coaster of what's happened at the beginning of the season. Simon has, I think, it's given us all a little bit of the ill will, but more than anything else, what's important is that we get back to Ibrox. We need the pitch to be as best it possibly can be. There's been loads of conversations happening about, what has to happen next in terms of now that the crane has gone.
Yeah.
That we, and I'm certain that the groundsmen have been absolutely itching to be able to try and get to it. We obviously need to be able to weave that into pretty much the goal immediately in the entire pitch, really, in front of the Copeland. And they'll be working on that as quickly as they possibly can. I'm going to make a slight confession. If we had to play the Dundee game at Hampden, I would probably I'd be all right with it. I'd make peace with it as long as we were definitely back in for the 28th. The reason being, and I hope I'm not jinxing this, I believe that we'll have enough to beat Dundee in the League Cup, so I don't really care that much about a venue. However, I think that the atmosphere, once we're back in to Ibrox in the first game back, if that could help with our league campaign against Hibs, I would be all for that. I still think there'll be a residual feeling if we are back in the week before. But listen, I think I'm already looking forward to being able to get back, and I know that thousands of people listening to this will feel exactly the same.
Yeah, I'm 100% on board. I'm hoping it's sooner rather than later. I've mentioned to you before, I've not really enjoyed the whole Hampden experience so far, just where you're situated in the seats. It just doesn't make for a good viewing experience for a football fan. So yeah, the sooner we're back at Ibrox, the better. I'm actually in one of the new seats in the Copeland in the cantilever section, so I'm looking forward to see what the view's like from there.
So it's your fault.
I'm one of the ones to blame. So yeah, I'm up not near where Colin is. He's going to be behind me now, so he won't like that, being stuck behind people. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what it's like. Union Bears will obviously be in the Copeland front now as well, so that's going to be something new, and you can just tell there's a bit of excitement building among the fan base. And when did you last see that for construction work going on at Ibrox?
I know, that's very true. That's very true. Simon, it wouldn't be a show with you on unless we talked about transfers. And unfortunately, at time of recording, Thursday afternoon, I did try to make it a little bit later just in case any news did break. However, none so far, I'm afraid to say. I'm not really surprised by that, if I'm being honest, Simon, because I do think that Rangers will be making moves, both incoming and outgoing, next week. Really excited about being able to try and see what materialises with that. But there has been some fairly big rumours circulating, one of which I think is all but been confirmed by the club's president, and both Rabbi Matondo potentially moving to Blackburn and Yanis Hadji going to Rapid Bucharest making the very sound football decision to sack Neil Lennon earlier on this week. Let's hope they double up with another great football decision, which is to bring in Yanis Hadji.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, good move for him because it's not really worked out. Didn't work out in Spain. Maybe a year back in Romania again, where we know he's got high press over there. He's a big figure in terms of the media profile he's got. His wedding was covered on national TV, for God's sake. So, yeah, it would make sense for him. I noticed his dad, Georgie Hadji, was in the paper as well, saying maybe not the best of moves to come back. But at the end of the day, that's probably because he manages a team over there still, and he doesn't want his son doing damage against him. To get his career back on track, even a 2 year deal, something like that, to go over there. He only needs to do well for 12 months, then he gets back into a better European league. So, yeah, he needs games. It's just a shame it's not worked out here for him. I always liked him as a player. Didn't have the best of pace, but he was always pretty intelligent. Just sadly didn't work out. It leaves our options at number 10 really scarce now. That's the one thing. We've put Diamandi there. He's probably the best we've got at the moment in terms of playing that role. Cantwell bombed out the team. Lammers sold. Tom Lawrence in and out the team. He's been playing a bit, but for me, he's not up to the role. So it's probably an area I'd like to see his address over the next week or two. Whether that happens remains to be seen. But as far as Hadji goes, it's the best move for him would be to maybe take that one back at Bucharest and help Rangers out as well.
Yeah, and it's been interesting because obviously he has been playing. He's been playing with the B team and wants to be able to try and make sure that he can keep himself fit. I think the interesting thing about Yanis Hadji for me, Simon, is there's always been this noise around him ever since he came to Rangers, and he's been linked more often than not in like the Turkish media, for example. Yeah. As you rightly say, he's got a huge reputation across there, forged a wholeheartedly believe because of who his dad is. He's continued to carry on part of that legacy as well. So there's always been that kind of, will he stay or will he go? I think the thing for me at the moment, if I think about Yanis Hadji, the person, is, what does he want to be able to try and get out the remainder of his career that, has had injury concerns?
Yeah.
He played in, the under-21s, under-23s for Romania for a long time. He's now obviously made it through to the international team, been part and involved and played in the Euros. And so that gives you that carrot, if you will, to make sure that you are playing regularly and, you'll continue to be involved. It didn't work out for him across in Spain. I understand that, again, from a Rangers financial perspective, we're keen on the move to materialise. But I just hope that there's somewhere or even someone advising Yanis Hadji to say, look, you have missed a lot of time out. You're about to hit a really strong period in your playing career where you can contribute. Your football experience will continue to grow. Being able to sit in the sidelines of a club where you're not going to be featured, have more or less been told that you're not part of the plan, isn't going to get you, that career that you wanted. It's time to be able to make a move that's right for you so that you can get as much football in you as you possibly can.
Yeah, and I'm quite happy he's actually been playing games in the B team, unlike Cantwell, who's just completely off the radar now. So it shows that Hadji still wants to be involved, he wants his fitness to be ready for whichever move that comes. And as you say, it's about time that he makes a step out. Whether it's going to be Rapid Bucharest or not, I'm not too sure. But on paper, it does seem like a good move, a good grounding to get him back home to Romania in a comfortable environment for at least a year. So, yeah, I hope he takes it, or gets a move anyway, because it's doing nobody any favours, especially with the contract situation as well. So, I wish him the best. Just a shame it didn't work out, but it's for the best that he moves on. And yeah, interesting to see what we do if we free up that wage anyway.
And again, as we mentioned there as well, another move which has been pretty well backed, I think, in terms of some of the local media down there is Blackburn interest in Rabbi Matondo. Again, a frustrating player, I think it's fair to say. He has shown some brilliant signs, but it just hasn't been consistent enough. Scored that fantastic goal against Celtic last season, and unfortunately we'll go into the category of, great goals against Celtic, but because we didn't get the result, will barely be remembered. That's why I sometimes find myself a little bit angry at him, because I can see what he's capable of doing. He's got pace, the burn. We should be able to try and utilise that. The challenge, I think, at times is the inconsistency with his final product. And his play generally doesn't merit him being able to sustain a place within the Rangers first team and become part of the starting lineup, even being able to come on as a sub. There's been some levels of contribution there, but again, I come back to that word inconsistency. For me, if Blackburn want to be able to get him, and I do totally appreciate the fact that he's on a decent wage at Ibrox, so again, the move makes sense from our perspective to be able to free up that cash. I go back to that idea of, if you know that you're not going to be playing week in and week out, why would you want to be able to stay?
Yeah, this is one that we've got to try and get done as quickly as possible. As you say, so inconsistent. The wage that he's on, he's just not been worth the money. He's been injured constantly as well. So for me, a great deal gets him down to the English Championship, puts him back in that shop window down south. He's still only young. Some players just don't suit the Scottish League, and he's one of them. He'll turn up one game out of four, and then he'll go missing for the next couple. He had a decent game at the weekend there, but again, he's just one of many players that we should hopefully move on. And as you said, with that high wage, it's imperative that we get that out and recycle it on a better player, and it's someone that can contribute more to Rangers going forward in the future.
And as you mentioned them earlier on, Todd Cantwell, there's been links now with a move to Leeds, of all places. This started at the beginning of the week, Simon. We're starting to hear some rumours around that. There hasn't been too much more based on it. I think that, as we've discussed on our Patreon site across the Daily Update, there were some murmurings from the local media down there, which for me is always a decent resource if you're ever looking for understanding as to whether or not there is a legitimate interest or not as well. Cantwell, as you say, is out of the picture. The manager has quite clearly cut ties with him. He is on a pretty penny as well. And, Leeds have been able to try and do some restructuring of their own. They're having to make some changes and adjustments. He is, if the rumours are to be believed, within their price bracket as well. But this chapter, for me, just needs closed now. We just need to be able to move on. He's not doing himself any favours, and I do appreciate the things that I've heard from some of the fan base to say, well, listen, he's here and we're paying him. Can we not make amends? And I'm at the stage now where I cannot see a way back. I think that the manager did try to keep the door open for him when he initially asked to leave, and then the manager said, listen, go and think about it. He did. He came back. He said, I still want to go. And if he's going to be a negative influence around the group, then he's absolutely right to remove him from it. But again, you just come back to this idea of, do you really want to have this be the marker of your career that, people consider you difficult to deal with? It's not the first manager that he's fell out with. And, within his club environment at the time that hasn't suited him. Whether that's a fragility or an ego thing, I genuinely have no idea. But right now, I suppose I can't be bothered with it any longer. I think it just needs to come to a close.
Yeah, I'm completely the same. He's a player that 9 times out of 10, he's flat to deceive. A lot of games, big games especially, just rarely turned up for us. And at the start of the season, when the managers asked him, do you want to stay, do you want to go, he used to say, right, if anything comes in, yeah, I'd be interested in going, but until then I'm going to give 100% and run through a brick wall for the club. He could have done that instead. No, while the club struggled over in Kiev and back at Hampden against him, he was sat up at Cameron House playing golf. So it just shows that he's not got the right mentality to be at Rangers. He's going to be no loss to us going forward, and the sooner we get him out, the better. And what will happen over the next couple of days is he's probably felt that he's had a team lined up. Nobody's come in for him. Teams down south or wherever will start getting desperate. So he will get a move. That's the thing. He will get a move to someone. Might not be his ideal first choice and what the level he expects, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the English Championship or he's somewhere abroad when the next week, because he's not the type of player to hang about at clubs too long when it doesn't go his way, as we've seen at Norwich and we've seen here now. Serie A is another one. There was teams from there interested, so it's one to watch. Don't think they'll be hard to deal with at all in terms of a fee. It's more about getting a wage off the bill to help us out, bringing better players in.
No, listen, I think that's fair. I think that we just need to... I think for me, Simon, what we need to be able to do is just make sure that we need to do these pieces of business first and remove where we've got the financial heavy hitters. Of course, we know that that's a focus for the manager and the board to be able to try and restructure where we're at from our wage expenditure, because fundamentally it just hasn't worked. If those moves then materialise any incoming players, and there has been a couple of links I'd love to be able to pick your brains about, then I anticipate that it will happen very, very quickly. We could see players leaving and coming in on the same day. One of those players that Rangers have initially been linked with is Thiago Gouveia,
Yes.
who I think is a very interesting signing. I think that he does want, I mean, from everything that's been said, I believe that he is looking to be able to leave Benfica. 23-year-old, which definitely puts him within the target range of where the manager has been bringing in players already. I think that this could be very interesting. I know that there are other clubs who are potentially interested in him, but if we're able to bring him in, and it will be a loan, there's been some heavy money touted for him previously, then it'll be interesting to see as to how that move could develop. But definitely one which I think makes a lot of sense.
Oh, it does. He's a really talented player. He can play across the line. Played 13, 14 times last season, 2 goals, a number of assists. So he was in and out of the team. He's not a weekly Benfica starter. That's the thing. That's why he's looking to get games. But he's played a fair amount of games for them as well. He's the good loan spell at Estoril a couple of years ago also. So he's done it for the B team. He's done it in the first team, and he's very few appearances had. He scored the other week there actually, in a 3-0 win. So he has after watching videos, I've seen bits of him at Benfica last season as well. He won against us a few times in the Europa League. It's a player that's got a high ceiling. See if you could get him on a loan with an option or an obligation to buy for next summer, something like that. It would be a no-brainer. He's just got a lot to offer us in terms of the wide play that we sorely lack at the moment. And there's another one from Benfica, Martin Neto was linked as well. I don't know if you noticed that one, Cammy. He's a central midfielder. He can play as a 10 as well. He's another exciting player. I mean, if you could get these two guys in, the quality of the first 11 would improve almost instantly, and that's what we want to see. Whether we can get these deals done or not, I'm not too sure, but Gouveia is certainly a player that we should go for 100%. I know Villarreal, I mean, they'd be a big rival for him. They want him, Anderlecht as well. So it's all about getting the manager around the table with them. If you can do that and get that sort of thing, get as far as that, then Philip Clement should be able to sell the club as best he can and get the player here. But then La Liga, as you say, is always a big pull for players, especially a Portuguese player just having to go over the border into Spain to play. So might be a tough one to do, but if there's any chance, go all out and bring him in because he's a really talented footballer.
Yeah, absolutely. And another player that Rangers were linked with across the course of this week is Fiorentina's Josip Brecalo. Has been out on loan at Hajduk Split for the last 6 months. Coming back to Fiorentina, but Fiorentina have more or less said that he's out of the picture as well. An interesting one for me. I think I spoke to David on our daily update during the week to talk about. It's interesting that the Fiorentina link is there because my hope was that had Bucharest not come in for their interest for Hadji, they were sniffing around him as well. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's a swap deal or whatever. Again, if it's going to be loans, you theoretically could do loans in both directions, or even if it's a sale of Yanis Hadji, it could help facilitate the move for Brecalo. That one's an interesting one because not necessarily his preferred position. I know that there has been times where he's played in at left back or left hand side. He can be central as well. But an interesting one that's that's been on the radar, and I don't know, Simon, and this is maybe my caution when I'm talking about this, but being able to bring in both of those players feels like a big stretch at the moment. However, similar to what I was saying about Gouveia, I think Brecalo would add in some proper quality in there as well. He has more or less been told that time is pretty much up. He'll be looking to be able to try and generate a move as best he possibly can. And if it's going to be to a club where he knows that he'll feature, my hope is that he sees that as a real attraction.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that he's probably one that's the easier to do the deal for rather than Gouveia, who's still quite highly rated at Benfica, whereas Brecalo's a player that Fiorentina want off the wage bill, and there's not many teams been sniffing about so far, but he's talented enough on his day. I don't know where he would play in that left-hand side or what. I know he can play further back, or he can play even in the attacking midfield role. So he is quite versatile. We're lacking certain players in certain positions as well. So it is one to look at. I would say that's probably the easier deal of the two to do. Personally, I would prefer Gouveia just purely because it's a higher ceiling in terms of the potential to buy him. I know Benfica would want a lot of money at the end of it. They heavily put on really heavy sell-on clauses up to 50% at times with some players, so that's just a risk you take with talented players. But Bricalo, I wouldn't turn my nose up at him if he was the one to come in. Again, there's been some controversies from him in the past, but really it's all about getting the best players on the park for us at the moment due to the lack of quality we've got in the side. If he's ready and able and he's willing to embrace Rangers, why not? Let's give him a go.
Yeah, absolutely. And in an ideal scenario, we'd have been able to try and get some of these deals done and even potentially try and feature them against Ross County. However, we obviously do have the small matter of the Old Firm game next weekend. But the bottom line, however, is that Rangers will have to be able to try and do their business. I can just see a lot of all of this happening next week and being able to try and do it. There's obviously one of the things that's important to remember with this as well, that whilst clubs maybe looking to try and do deals, they'll also have to be able to have enough time to replace players that, if they are playing for them at the moment, obviously we mentioned Gouveia there as well, and he has been playing, has been scoring, they still need replacements. And so it's about lining up these deals so that if they are, and it's the same scenario with us, right? We are doing it more necessarily from a financial perspective, whereas, you know, if we were to sell a player that we had a real gap in and he was a consistent performer for us, we need to be able to replace him. The clubs that we are hoping to attract players from have exactly the same challenge.
Yeah, they do. And that's the one thing I mentioned to you the other day on the Roundtable pod, where this is probably our best chance of getting players in, was this week to give them some minutes against Ross County, because we wouldn't be expecting too much the following week if they were in the squad against Celtic. So unless it's a special player like Gouveia, that's the thing. He could probably come in right away into a starting lineup in a big game like that because he's had minutes, he's fully fit, he's match fit. He's the type that you could probably throw straight into a game like that. There's nothing to lose. That type of player would probably relish that sort of atmosphere and that opportunity to play in a big game. So that's my only concern, is we've not done anything this week. I wanted one or two in the door, but again, it's all boiling down to not being able to get players out for us. And we'll see over the next couple of days. It's going to be hectic, as you say. I would say I'm really looking forward to it. But in a way, it's kind of like Russian roulette, is to say who's going to come in the door. That's the thing, because none of us really. There's been the one or two names that have been out there, but we're going to see 2, 3, 4, 5 names come from nowhere, and then one of them's going to come in the door. I just get that feeling that it's going to be someone that's not even mentioned yet, that will end up in the door at Rangers. And it's whether it's the right positions that we're targeting. I know we've talked about the midfield, the attacking midfield, the right back area as well. So there's so much to do in so little time. I wouldn't be expecting major things. If we could get 2 or 3 in the door and 3 or 4 out, I'd be very happy at that.
Yeah. Listen, I think that's fair. I think it's what we're looking for in terms of being able to try and do business properly. It's easier said than done, which I think, you know, everyone listening can absolutely appreciate. One move which looked like as if it was pretty much signed, sealed, delivered, but the player decided to make the decision to stay with Cyriel Dessers, was approached by Atlanta United. Rangers had pretty much agreed the move. Looked like as if it was pretty much done and dusted, and then Dessers made the decision that he would rather stay. An interesting one, Simon. We've spoken a lot about Cyriel Dessers across the course of the last number of months. An interesting one I'm keen to kind of get your opinion on. Now, I suppose I want to kind of preface this by not saying that this is about highlighting the criticisms of Cyriel Dessers. There's an element to this where in any other world and any other player, you'd almost be thinking to yourself, well, it's good that he wants to stay and I'm glad of it, but he still has this sentiment amongst the Rangers fans that some of our supporters would be glad to see the back of him. There's another side of him as well, which says, you know, he was our top goal scorer last season in terms of the amount of game time that he had, the goals scored, the important goals that he scored. He has scored, I think I'm right in saying 3 and 5 at the beginning of this season.
Yeah, a couple of assists as well.
And in any other world, you'd be saying, well, you know, we don't want to get rid of this guy. There's obviously the other side of that, which says, you know, we're waiting on Danilo coming back. Igaman is getting close to fitness. So we've went from one striker last season to potentially three. But an interesting decision, I think, by him to say that he wants to be able to stay. I am on record for the fact that, when you talk about a guy who at one time was getting booed when he was getting substituted off the park at Ibrox, to been able to have the season that he had last season with the amount of minutes that he had, right? I don't want to change the picture too much on that. It seems like he's invested. We were going to be able to get back the money that we had paid for him. I think around about $4.5 million. But he made the decision. He wants to stick around and see what he can do.
Yeah, and I mean, ideal world, if that offer came in 2-3 weeks ago, I think we'd probably have encouraged him, like the club would have encouraged him to take it. Right now, Danilo's still way off fitness. Igaman's not even kicked a ball in anger for us yet. We've got one striker when it comes to big games, and selling him just now is probably, a no-no, because, again, nobody left. That's the thing, and I don't think we'd have brought anybody in this late in the window in terms of the striker position. Maybe one to look at again in January, if just depending on a whole host of situations. If we're in a title race, there's absolutely no chance he'll be sold, because his goals they're there in black and white. I mean, we can slate him all we want for his hold-up play or a lack of, but for me, we've got to keep a hold of him just now, because he's all we've got. The other two options are nowhere near ready. Igaman we might see at the weekend. I think he's posted on Instagram that he's back full training, so he's possibly going to get some minutes at the weekend, or at least be on the bench finally. So it's one to keep an eye on for him. But Dessers, a lot of self-belief in him. He never lets the criticism get him down. That's the one thing, and he's chipping in with goals, and that's the one thing we've not had from anywhere else in the park of late, really. The goals have dried up all over the place, apart from the centre-forward position from Dessers. So it's going to need to be something that's addressed. I'd assume Dessers stays. I think the wide areas and the attacking midfield area is going to be addressed, because there's not enough goals coming for them. They're probably the priority positions over the next couple of days. So Dessers, happy enough for him to stay at the moment. Should he be a starting striker going forward? Absolutely not for me. If Danilo can get fit, jury's still out on him. Even before his injury, it was a lot of misses that were coming in as well. So I'd probably revisit it in January in terms of a starting striker, but then again, they're a lot harder to buy in January as well, with clubs not willing to sell. So let's see how it's going in the league. Dessers he's here just now. We've got to back him. That's all we can do.
Yeah, and I think that's entirely fair. I do agree, by the way, with Danilo. He obviously started against St Johnstone, which I think he's definitely got a lot of ring rust. He did have some chances, did create them, and I think, once he gets a decent run of games under his belt, we will see goals from him. In terms of the movement, everything else that I can see from it, I do like the fact that he's active, and I do like the fact that he, as I say, he wants to contribute, he wants to be able to get into it. He needs time, and it's absolutely peak Rangers in terms of having two strikers coming back from injury layoffs, or being out of touch in terms of fitness, etc. They're almost on a parallel in terms of being able to come back in and to feature. The only thing I think for me, Simon, and again, keen to kind of get your thoughts on this, I think the manager wants to be ultra cautious in terms of aggravating any of those injuries and potentially setting the player back even further. I've made mention of this before in terms of what happened with Cortez.
Yeah.
Felt he was going to be okay, and obviously had to get taken off at Tynecastle. The manager doesn't have his troubles to seek from an injury perspective. We all know that. But as you say, I'm curious. I'm curious to see what the reaction will be. I think, I think he'll start against Ross County. I think he'll score against Ross County. But I think it's also time that we do start to embrace what this guy has done for us and be appreciative of that. And I do appreciate that there are definitely fans out there as well who are already in that space. But there is a lot of dissenting voices who get frustrated that, Cyriel Dessers will take a few chances before he's able to convert. And I suppose for me, that's why I'm a little bit worried that if we do get Danilo and Igaman up to speed and they are able to be our starting striker, can we rely on Cyriel Dessers being able to come in off the bench? He did it against St Johnstone, But at the same point, that's where, again, with all due respect to St Johnstone, it's going to be more difficult if you start looking at the teams further up the league. That lot, Aberdeen, Hearts, etc. Do you turn around and look at Cyriel Dessers being the guy that says, right, with 20 minutes to go, he can get you out of jail?
Yeah, I think in certain big games coming up, it's going to be Dessers. So Celtic games at Pittodrie, stuff like that, Dessers will probably get the nod. At the weekend, I would probably give Danilo another hour, even 45 minutes again, just to get more minutes into his legs. He needs the minutes into him because he's not going to get them elsewhere. B team, he's not eligible to play with them. There's no bounce games lined up. So again, it's ideally a game for him. Even the Dundee game in the cup as well. These are ideal games to get Danilo minutes. As I said, 45 minutes here and there could do him the world of good. Dessers is still going to be your main striker in certain games, but I think for tomorrow, for Saturday especially against Ross County, you can get away with starting Danilo and getting at least 45 into him.
Yep, I agree with that. And looking forward to that game at Hampden on Saturday afternoon. A Ross County team that, let's be honest, has not started well. 2 draws already in the league against Motherwell and at home to Dundee United. And in particular, a very embarrassing League Cup exit to Spartans last weekend. It'll be interesting to see as to how they react, Simon. And for me, as always, we should be focused on what we're able to contribute and what we can do. We are a little bit out of sorts at the moment because we've had to bring in some players who are having to play slightly out of position. Some players who are not at full fitness, yet still involved. And as we mentioned there, we obviously tried to give Danilo minutes against St Johnstone, which I think definitely helped. I think you are right, however, I do think that Cyriel Dessers will start. There has been a lot of discussion throughout the course of this week about Dijon Sterling. Mm-hmm. And as I say, we're recording on Thursday afternoon, so we haven't had the press conference yet. But my understanding is that he was wearing what I think, and listen, I'm not a medical expert by any stretch, but a lightweight cast, which we felt could be some sort of hand or wrist injury, but he played. Mm-hmm. And so, again, coming back to that aforementioned caution that the manager may have, I don't think he would have played him if there was any potential risk. So I'm hoping that we'll get some game time out of him because we do have to have one eye on our trip to Parkhead next week.
Yeah, absolutely. I would probably play the midfield that will start against him. So I would go Diamande, Barron, and Dujon Sterling. I keep calling him Raheem Sterling. Dujon Sterling, for me, goes into midfield next weekend against Celtic as well. So, yep, start them. Put Diamande further up. Tom Lawrence is just a no-no for me in terms of that pressing game. He's just not got it. I mean, you see him, he has featured in some games, but yeah, we can't be putting him at Parkhead up front with Dessers. That's just not a logistical thing to do. There's no logic to it at all. So yeah, Sterling into midfield with Barron as the holders, and then push Diamande further up, who actually done pretty well against St Johnstone in that role. That's the one thing from Diamande's games. It's missing. He just needs to add a couple of goals, and if they can come from that number 10 position, whilst we're still looking for players, that's the way to go. They're the 3 that should be starting these next 2 matches.
And an interesting conversation, I think, to be had regarding Vlavklav Cherny. Cherny has to play against Celtic. But Ross McCausland did well with a brilliant finish against St Johnstone. Just a lovely dink past the keeper. I said at the time, I think, that's a guy who looks like he's scored in his last 2 or 3 games, such was, the neatness of the finish. But that all being said, I think that, we know that Cherny, we need to try and build him up to the 90 minutes. I still think, as I say, he does have to play against Celtic. Ross McCausland, I think, has had some degree of criticism. I don't think he was fantastic to start with against Dynamo Kiev. But that right-hand side has been a conundrum for a wee while. I think that Cherny does answer some of those questions. How would you handle the right-hand side position in terms of those options?
Yeah, as you say, Cherny probably needs the minutes. I would give him 70 against Ross County minimum. And then McCausland, again, as you say, a bit of unfair criticism for me. Got to remember he's a young lad who was kind of put in out of nowhere into the team last season at points as well, just due to injuries. He took his chance well for us. And I do like him. I do like him as a player. He's got a lot to offer, and we've just got to remember that in terms of young players coming through the ranks at Rangers. Just we should be behind them, giving them a chance, and he's one of the ones that does deserve a fair crack at it. So yeah, Czerny ultimately will get the starting jersey at Parkhead. I'd give him 70 minutes against Ross County and get Ross McCausland on for the final 20 just to keep his momentum going, his confidence building. But yeah, Czerny absolutely for match time minutes needs at least an hour, I'd say. An hour to 70 minutes on Saturday before we go hell for leather next weekend.
Yeah, we'll touch on the defence in just a second, but I suppose we better talk about that in terms of the left-hand side, because it'll certainly be a factor. Jeffy, I'm sure we'll start at left-back, assuming that he is still a Rangers player. I wouldn't be opposed to Rabbi Matondo starting on the left-hand side, purely because I think we started to see some elements of a decent relationship between Matondo and Jeffy. I don't think the manager will be afraid to play him because of this, potential transfer talk, etc. But we need to be able to, for me, being able to try and start out there pretty positively. There was some relationship build, as I say, in the League Cup game last weekend. Matondo's get pace to burn, right? We know that, of course. He's going to be able to try and support Dessers as much as he possibly can, again, on the assumption that he starts. But that left-hand side, I think, looks like it should be relatively straightforward compared to what we've had to do previously. It could be the case that we might even see McCausland or Czerny out in one of those sides if he doesn't decide to go with Matondo. I wouldn't be adverse to being able to do that because, again, we've already discussed the players that we suspect will play at Parkhead.
Yeah, I think if Matondo's still here for the Ross County game, he'll probably get a nod for that. Then the following weekend is the big one because I still think Matondo is going to be out the door over the next week or so. So who do you play over there? Is Cortez going to be back? We don't really know. Could it be a new signing?
I think it'll be too early for Cortez.
Yeah, somebody like Bricalo coming in, he wouldn't be match fit either. We could get Gouveia. That would be the one for me. If we could get him in, as I said, we'd just throw him straight in that game because he's ready. But yeah, Matondo is the logical choice to start on Saturday, unless, as you say, McCausland's also an option. But yeah, I would say Matondo, half-decent game last weekend against St Johnstone, probably gets the start for me then. If he's still at the club, we know is it Blackburn and stuff like that are really heavily interested in him. So yeah, it's one to watch over the next, because it's a position where we are still pretty weak with the injuries and Matondo's form being hot and cold. So yeah, if we can get Matondo out the door and bring in another left winger ahead of next weekend as well, that's really an interesting one to watch out for.
And again, we've not been given the update yet in terms of from the manager about the fitness of Robin Proper. Obviously, did have to go off against St Johnstone.
Yeah.
I think the best classification I can give it, Simon, is a little bit of an impact injury. He said that he felt an impact on his back and his hip, and he was struggling to be able to try and turn. He did signal that he had to go off. I think he kind of made that pretty clear. In a way, I suppose I'm quite glad that he did that because knowing our luck, he could have played through it, aggravated it even more, and then he would have been out for the fabled 5 to 7 weeks.
Yeah.
So I suppose the question to now is, if he is touch and go, do you risk him against Ross County, or do you allow him to get that extra week off, maybe recover him because he has to play against Celtic for me if he's near fit. Liam Balogun has been unwell. My understanding is that he may not be ready, which almost defaults us to a John Sutter and Ben Davis defence.
Yeah, it's not looking great in terms of that. You get Inciala as well, who's been playing B team games, but I'm looking at Ben Davies being a bit of a hindrance in terms of the defensive squad pecking order at the moment because he's keeping guys like Inciala out the team by taking a place on the bench. So that's the one thing that you'd like to see if Davies is another one that can maybe move out and loan. But Proper, I'm hoping he's fit because again he's another player that will need some minutes. Balogun, ideally, I would probably play. It's not ideal, not ideally, but those two I'd probably play them against Celtic. Balogun's the only defender we've got with pace, and what is he, 35 now? That's kind of a damning factor in terms of our defence at the moment. Proper's only just in the door, so it's really unfair to judge him at the moment. But those are the two I would probably start against Celtic at centre half, to be honest with you. But we should be able to get by with Davies and Suter at the weekend, surely.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, but I suppose the only thing that kind of concerns me, you mentioned Enciala there, and I was actually really excited when I saw Enciala coming in because obviously comes from a strong pedigree in terms of his footballing background. Obviously, we were able to get him off of AC Milan. I did feel that he would be coming over here to feature, and it's not really happened yet. Now, you've obviously mentioned that he has been playing for the B team. He played for them on Monday against Blackburn Rovers. Again, I used context within this as well, but it was a 6-2 battering against Blackburn Rovers. I don't know if he's making much of a case for himself to be able to be involved within that, and again, conceding so many goals. I just think that the first team at the moment is just a step beyond him right now. I think it's possible, and it should be given, like you say, what the boy's capable of. I saw him a little bit in pre-season. Again, I give him that context of, having to fit in and, just settle in, I think, more than anything else in terms of, his teammates and Scottish football as a whole, etc. But again, I don't think it does himself a lot of good when, as I say, the B team result did not go their way on Monday evening.
No, it didn't. Who's to say? I've not seen any highlights, so I can't say who was at fault for what not. But Blackburn probably a bit more experienced in terms of our guys at that level. And Ciala's got plenty of time on his side. I'd imagine if the games were at Ibrox, he might get a wee look in for 10-15 minutes here and there. That's the one thing. He'd have the backing of the home crowd behind him. Clement's doing the right thing, not by chucking him straight in. There's obviously a temptation there to do that due to the pedigree, as you say. But for once, I do think this is the right thing. We're making him take baby steps into the team. And then get him involved in the matchday squads. So, yeah, I'd like to see it. I think he probably will be on the bench, actually, if the options are pretty limited. So, one to keep an eye on over the next couple of months to see if he can force his way in.
Yeah. And, just coming on to John Suter for a second, I thought he played well against St Johnstone. The likelihood being that, he will play against Celtic as well. So, I'd love him to be able to have a strong, confident game against Ross County just to build his confidence up. I don't think, he started the season brilliantly. He is absolutely a siege defender, and I think we know that. And there's going to be elements of that where I think that we're definitely going to have to see that at Parkhead, because we know that we'll be in certain periods of the game under the cosh there. All that being said, Ross County should give him, hopefully, a continual lift into one eye for when we go over to the East End. Most important thing, I think, for me is just to make sure that defence just looks nice and solid. I've seen Connor Barron drop back into that kind of almost just sitting in front of the defence, sometimes sitting alongside them.
Yeah.
There's been some cover that he's provided in there. I've seen Suter going out to be able to try and help out James Tavernier out on the right-hand side as well. The manager's hopefully giving him, that encouragement to be able to go and just keep his head up, being able to try and do that. And again, like I said, I thought he played very well against St Johnstone. And that's not to say, by the way, that, St Johnstone on paper looked like a straightforward result. I don't think it really was, if I'm being honest. And Suter was called upon a number of times, and I think he acquitted himself pretty well.
Yeah, that was probably his best performance in a wee while, actually. So we're maybe been a wee bit harsh on him over the last couple of months. But yeah, as I said, you mentioned about being a siege defender, and we're probably going to be under siege a wee bit next weekend. So yeah, he needs more minutes. That's the one thing about him. He needs these minutes in him. So again, a full 90 minutes is not going to do him any harm. He's a player that can pop up the goals at the other end as well, as we've seen. His set piece ability from headers. So let's hope that he can have a strong game at the weekend, and he has a strong game at Parkhead as well, because at the end of the day, he is a decent centre half. I know I've been harsh on him recently in terms of the pace he's got or he's not got, but yeah, he's been having to deal with multiple partners over the last couple of weeks as well, from Proper to Davies to Balogun. So he's been the one consistent there. So I think it's pretty obvious now that Souttar's going to be a first choice.
Yeah, I definitely think so. So, yeah, we'll just have to see what happens next in terms of. I think Ross County should be ideally pretty straightforward. As I say, they've not started the season well. They'll want to be able to try and make amends for that, but I think that through everything we've seen so far, and certainly everything we've discussed at the moment as well, Rangers should be too strong for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'll do us for this week, folks. David will be back with you to unpack the Ross County game on Monday on the flagship. And if you'd like to hear even more from us, jump on over to our Patreon site, which is patreon.com/heart and hand. A massive week coming up for Rangers and potential transfers, incomings and outgoings, as we've very briefly mentioned on this week's show. But you won't want to miss anything, and we will bring you all of those updates as quickly as we possibly can. So if you want to hear it first, head on over. Simon, I think you're doing a transfer show next week as the window slams shut, to use your very own tabloid language.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see some sensational moves as people jet in and we get some swooping deals. Yeah.
Oh, my God, man, honestly. Absolutely dial into the cliche, Simon. But listen, it entertains you, and listen, that's why it's always great. If you want to hear, as I say, even more from us, head on over to patreon.com. I'll be back with you again next Thursday. Just before we go, thank you to our producers in London, Mike Lee and Paul Myers. And also, just so you know, folks, as well, if you happen to be heading abroad anywhere and you would like to be able to make sure that you don't miss any of your Rangers games, why not take advantage of a fantastic offer we have with our friends at NordVPN? If you head to nordvpn.com/heart and hand, you will actually get a discounted rate for all of your VPN deals as well, and you get a 30-day money-back guarantee. Aside from the access that it will present you, there's loads of security features in there as well, so please go and check that out as well. We'll be back with you again on Monday, folks. Thanks so much for listening. Have a brilliant weekend. Here's the 3 points at Hampden in what I can only hope is our last league game there this season. Simon, thank you so much for joining me.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, folks. Speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.